They tell you slavery ended in 1865. Then they whisper the fine print. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. That's the 13th Amendment, the abolition of slavery with a trapdoor built into the floor. And America did what America often does best. It took a moral victory, found the loophole, and built an industry inside it. Because once you carve an exception into freedom, the next question becomes inevitable. Who gets marked criminal? And what can you legally take from them after that? The United States has built one of the most extreme incarceration systems on earth. It's not just a lot of prisons, it's a national habit, a dependency. Nearly 2 million people live in prisons and jails, and millions more are under supervision. And the burden doesn't land evenly. Black Americans are about 13% of the population, but roughly 37% of people in prison or jail are black. Now pause. If a system is allowed to force labor as punishment for crime, and that system cages disproportionately black and brown people, what do you call the outcome? A coincidence? Or a design that doesn't need to announce itself anymore? People argue about whether prison labor is slavery. They'll fight you on the word. They'll demand you soften it, make it polite, make it academic. But the mechanism is simple. The Constitution allows compelled labor after conviction. Prisons can punish refusal, and the labor can be paid pennies or practically nothing, depending on where you are and what work you're doing. So the real question isn't, is it exactly like 1860? The real question is, why does a modern democracy still need an exception clause to keep involuntary servitude alive at all? Now, let's walk into Louisiana, because Louisiana doesn't hide the continuity. Louisiana puts it on land. The Louisiana State Penitentiary, known as Angola, sits on a former slave plantation. That's not rhetoric, it's geography. And in 2024, incarcerated men at Angola sued, alleging they are forced to perform agricultural labor in brutal heat for little or no pay, and that refusal can bring severe discipline, including solitary confinement. Read that slowly. Former plantation, mostly black men according to the lawsuit reporting, forced field labor, punishment for refusal. America doesn't need chains when it has policy. And if you're thinking, that's just one prison, understand this. Angola is not an accident, it's a symbol, a fossil that's still breathing. Because the exception clause didn't just allow prison work. Historically, it helped enable the post-Civil War pivot. Criminalize survival, arrest the newly freed, lease them back into labor. A new name, same extraction. And once a society learns it can turn bodies into revenue through punishment, that habit doesn't vanish, it evolves. Now pull the camera back to the beginning of the pipeline. Because the pipeline doesn't start at a prison gate. It starts earlier, quieter, and with paperwork. The ACLU describes the school-to-prison pipeline as the pattern where students, especially black and brown students, are pushed out of schools and into the justice system through harsh discipline and policing. In 2017-18, black students were about 15% of enrollment, but around 29% of referrals to law enforcement and about 32% of school-based arrests. So if your community taught you they want you on record, that's not paranoia floating in a vacuum. That's people learning to survive a system where the first contact becomes a file, and the file becomes a future. And here's the darkest part. When a society builds a machine that can legally take labor after conviction, that society has a quiet incentive to keep the machine fed. Not always through some cartoon conspiracy, sometimes through 1,000 normal decisions. A stop, a search, a charge, a plea deal, a probation violation, a suspension, a record, a life redirected. And then, once the person is inside, the exception clause waits like a signed contract. Work or else. So let's name the argument people will throw at you. They should work. They committed crimes. Fine. Then answer this. Why is compelled labor written into the Constitution as an exception to slavery? Why do we accept a world where punishment includes servitude? Why are labor protections so thin once the uniform changes? And why, in a nation that claims freedom is sacred, does freedom become conditional the moment the state labels you criminal, even when the system that hands out that label is demonstrably unequal? This is why movements exist to remove the exception clause, to end the last legal doorway where involuntary servitude can still walk in wearing a badge of legitimacy. Because the argument isn't no accountability. The argument is accountability should not require slavery language to function. And maybe the harshest question of all is the one nobody wants to sit with. If America truly believed slavery was evil, why did it leave itself a way to keep it, as long as it could rename the people wearing it? That's the story, not just of prisons, but of a loophole that became a culture, and of a country still deciding right now whether freedom is a right or a privilege with exceptions.